Hey everybody, Mr. Alex here, and we're back for round 2 of our interview with Donna Barba Higuera, author of Lupe Wong Won't Dance. Before you go any further, I want you to know that this interview is loaded with spoilers. That's right, loaded with spoilers. So if you haven't read the novel, I want you to hit pause, go read it really quickly, and meet me right here. Without further ado, let's roll that opening montage, and the rest of the interview is next.
So Donna, thanks so much for hanging out for the second part of this, and I'm so glad you did because I have a few bones to pick with you.
Here we go.
Right? Anybody who's tuning in now knows that this conversation is going to have spoilers about the book. We're going to talk about things that actually happened in the book, may have happened to you in life. Even though I hear my child in the background, we're just going to ignore that. If you can hear him, ignore him. Somebody will grab him and take him away. But I have my own little Lupe growing up, but that's
Good luck.
Story. Good luck is right. He started rolling his eyes to me, and I am not making this up, at 18 months.
You're in big trouble.
At 6 months, he would babble, argue with me. I would say something to him like, "You can't do that," and he would blah 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 back, and I'm like, "Oh my God, what have I done?" But that's another
hope you
story.
tape it and have evidence.
We do, and I have, I have actually a. We don't say video anymore. I have a recording of him yodeling at 2 years old.
Wow.
He's a pretty special little dude. One day I'll pull him on camera. Actually, he is the opening montage. So when you see the interview, you'll see him. He's the opening montage. He's the one in the credits. But here's, part of the bone. Let's start with the first bone. Did you have to kill her father?
Yes.
Why? Why is that so important? We need strong.
And then I laughed afterwards.
Yeah, and I liked it. But it's like, we need strong male role models. Why did we kill the father?
Well, I hope that I showed her brother, however ridiculous he may be, he's a support system. And when it comes down to the hard parts, he's there for her. And honestly, that's what a lot of family structure is, where older brothers have to pick up the pieces. And in her case, her father, if we say, spoilers, he dies in an accident. Part of what we do as writers is we manipulate, and I needed her father's voice because my father was such a huge influence for me, and I always heard his voice in the right moments. And I grew up playing fast pitch, wanted to play baseball. My father was just this amazing influence sports wise with me, and played catch with me, and was rough with my sister and I. He made us work very hard, but in the hardest times in my life, I heard his voice. And I wanted Lupe to hear her father's voice as she was going through the hard parts. And the way I decided to do that, where it would have more gravity, was that he wasn't there on a day-to-day basis and couldn't be. And I know a lot of people in children's literature say, "Oh, lose both parents, don't have them there."
It's the Bambi syndrome, or the Disney syndrome.
And I don't necessarily believe in that. I do think it's important to show parental role models. And so I still, her grandfather also has some great words of advice for her. And, he's based on my children's great grandfather, who just had these amazing words of advice, and he would, go and he taught Tai Chi into his 80s. He was just this amazing man, and he was just said these really wise things, and I needed Lupe to have that as well. And the dad
Well, I
didn't.
think he provides the overriding unifying theme for the entire book.
Mhm.
And it has to do with obstacles. Why don't you talk to us a little bit about that?
So as far, obstacle, Lupe is just this character who wants to get rid of the things that either annoy her or she thinks are unjust or what have you. And her grandfather gives her this advice that obstacles are there. And this is actually partially advice my father would have given me growing up, is that life is hard and there are obstacles. And, sometimes the way around an obstacle isn't to divert around it, it's to go through it and to conquer it. And even if it's something you don't like. So yeah, there were things even in my life that I didn't want to do and I wasn't good at them, or there was always an excuse, but my dad always encouraged me, you at least try and you do it. And I think that was a lesson Lupe needed to learn, is that getting rid of things all the time isn't the answer.
So your father passed away.
My father's still around.
Your father's still around.
My
Okay.
father is right out that window. He's
Really?
living with
Is he
us.
peeking in saying hello right now?
No, he's my dad is nearing 80 and doesn't have the best hearing, and he loves to be out. He's out in the garden. He fights with the squirrels and the rabbits and the crows, and he loves to be out there. And
Well,
he,
it's great that you still have him being able to whisper in your ear and yell at
yes,
you. What I have to tell you, that as somebody who has lost a parent, what ends up happening is that that voice that you gave to Lupe's dad, most of the time you hear coming out of your own mouth when you talk to your children or when you talk to other people. So,
yeah,
if you're going to be, if you want to be eternal, become a parent, because your children will end up repeating not only your mistakes, but also your successes
yeah. I
very
repeat my
often,
mother's words sometimes.
right? And you hear them in her tone, don't you?
Oh, absolutely. My mother was a kindergarten teacher, and so the tone is normally like this. And, just very soft and a little bit of a head tilt.
But inside it's like, I will annihilate you if you don't stop.
Exactly.
I speak kindergarten. It's the only way to get control of an entire kindergarten classroom.
Yeah.
So you also kind of, play is not the right word, but you delved into a little bit with orientation and identity. And you have a line in there that I think is brilliant. And
I know
it's
exactly
something
what you're
like,
saying.
I'm 12. I thought I'd have a few years before I'd figure that out.
That was a direct quote.
Okay. Well, whomever said it, because I'm not going to pry, it's none of my business. I don't want to out anyone. That is a beautiful line, because you know what? Some kids do know at 12. The vast
Mhm.
majority do not know at 12. And when a parent says to a child, "Are you gay?" and this parent was not attacking or doing, I mean, it
Mhm.
came up in very simple conversation between Lupe and her mother, I would have probably asked the same thing given the circumstances. For somebody so self-affirming like Lupe to respond and say, "I don't know.
Mhm.
I thought I'd have a few years to figure that out." I went, yes. Talk to us about that, because that was a great moment in the book for anybody that identifies on the LGBTQ plus spectrum.
Well, I think that I don't want to sound like, an old ninny, but when I was growing up, it was, people didn't talk about it. And for my kids, I was always really open with them and asking them questions and things. And it was just a normal topic. But I think a lot of kids now have the freedom to think about these things and don't feel that they have to be put into a box at such a young age. And they shouldn't. They should be able to be thinking about these things and questioning themselves without feeling threatened. And I wanted that for Lupe, and I wanted her to have, these open conversations with her mother, like I do with my kids. But I think that a lot of kids don't know. I have so many friends who say, oh, I knew at this age. And I get that. And I think that's wonderful, but not
Sure, it's
every kid
totally
does.
possible that they did know at that age. It's also
Yeah.
totally possible that they had absolutely no idea until they were in their late teens or even as adults. Sexuality is a spectrum. It's a continuum. It's not a straight
Yes.
line.
That's what I wanted to say. And you said it so much more efficiently than I did. It's,
I have a lot of practice saying it.
well, it for everybody, it's different. And I remember when I was Lupe's age, I wasn't really thinking about boys or girls or anything. I didn't think about it. And so, every kid's different and when they, figure things out. But I don't, it shouldn't be a threatening thing. Like you said, her mother just asks it as a normal point of conversation.
So let's talk about Andy's family,
Mm-hmm.
because you sucker punched me. You really did. Oh, you got me good, and I write about this in the review. I am an enlightened. I try to be. I'm not far from perfect. I'm a guy who tries to do his best every day, and like most people, fails. Right? I try to do my best, but I don't always get everything right.
Same.
But the revelation that Andy's family was Black towards the end of the book was a revelation to me, because I suspect that you purposely wrote them so that they would not conjure that image in the mind. Am I far off base here?
No, I think that when I was writing Andy, I just was writing a normal family, dynamic. And there was one Easter egg in the beginning of the book. And I just said, when they're talking about the bubble campaign for Lupe and her
Right, when Lupe was
bubble.
talking about getting a Mexinese bubble down.
Yes. Yeah. And Andy was kind of, not necessarily like not teasing her about it, but kind of, she did, I guess, teased her a little bit about all her different causes. And Lupe's response is, that's not fair. You have a bubble for Black. And it's in the very beginning of the novel. But I think a lot of times I've had, readers who have it doesn't even kind of occur to them. They just keep reading and they don't think of Andy in that way. And one of my critique partners who's Black even said, when did Andy become Black? I said, she's been Black all along. And then she goes back and she's like, oh my gosh, you're right. And she even said, there are stereotypes and things that we think we're going to see and we don't. And so,
Well, I think it was beautiful, because it really allows those of us that missed that little Easter egg that you put at the beginning to stop and examine our very own internal biases, because that character could have been, I direct shows, right? And I think during the casting process, why does this character have to be a certain color? Why does this character have to be a certain ethnicity? And in my mind, I'm reading this book and I'm automatically casting without giving a thought. And then I think, well, when I direct, I don't do that. Why am I doing that when I read?
yeah. Well, Andy's a teeny bit based on a friend of mine from college. And, I her family had money. And I remember
The
going to
name, by the way, also threw us, right? Because Andalusia, it's like not your
yeah,
typical name.
exactly. Yeah. And my friend, when I picture Andy in my mind's eye, I see my friend and I see her family and visiting their home. And it was 2 stories. And it's like, oh my gosh, they're so rich. And her mother, the house was so well put together. And it's kind of based on her, but only because I had this really amazing
Don't go any
friendship.
further, because she's going to start asking for money.
Well, it could be 2 people, so I'm not going to say which one because they were both very similar.
All right, well, I have to say that it's a wonderful moment in the book. Those of you who read it and missed it now can see it. Those of you who read it and got it, congratulations. But it really makes you stop and think. And it's it's wonderful that you're putting this in for 10th graders, 11, in the middle grades. And I hope that when they just kept reading, right? Because they got it from the beginning and thought absolutely nothing of it. So it was really a revealing moment about how we conjure characters in our own minds before going forward. Now, Lupe, we obviously have a picture of, right? She's right behind me. She's been staring at us for the last hour or so. How happy are you with this illustration? It's pretty amazing.
Okay. I have to this is such a weird thing. You're the only person I've spoken with about this. When I first saw the picture, I was like, what the heck? Because I could have sworn that I've never met the illustrator. He's in the UK. I was like, did he Google me? Because this could be my older daughter who is full Chinese. And I pulled up a picture of her in middle school where she was, I told you, she's a Spitfire and she's always like kind of has a little bit. And even I showed her and she goes, is that me? And it looks just like her. The expression, everything about her, the pouty little lower lip. I'm like, that is my kid. And so I have this affinity toward this picture. It's hard.
Gorgeous. The art is beautiful.
Isn't it amazing? I was so blown away. His name is Mason London, and he has this, huge Instagram following. And I know at one point they were trying to reach him for something and they found out he'd been picked up by Nike or something. So he's just doing amazing work. But yeah, I love the illustration. I love what he shows on the cover. You can see the kids, they're again, like Easter eggs. There's so many little things that are within the book. I'm like, he actually read the book because there's, the school mascot and the kids dancing. And
I'm going to show the cover during the intro to the first interview so people can see it. But it's great. You're right. I mean, it's filled with all sorts of great little details about the book that once you go back and you read the book and you look at the cover again. But the artwork is beautiful. So this is the first time you tell him how much you like it.
I wrote him.
Oh, good. You wrote him.
I wrote him to tell him. I did not tell him the tidbit about my daughter, about how that looks just like her. But when I first pulled it up, because I didn't want to say, hey, did you Google me and find a picture of my daughter? But it does look just like her.
So at the end of the book, and we talked about this a little bit in our last interview, you end, and I can get into more detail now, right? With basically what we would call, when I was growing up, una tombola, a school fair, a big gathering of all the different cultures in the school, having a big kumbaya moment. Okay, I'm laying it on thick because that's how it was in the book.
It was a big
No, I don't think it was over the top because I was crying by the end of it. It was thick. I said it was thick, but I don't think it was over the top. But it's a gushy emotional moment, enough to get this guy who is like stone cold, right, to start tearing up towards the end. And it is a big kumbaya moment where we start to see all the different cultural elements that come together within the school. That doesn't happen.
I know. And that's the part that I wanted it to be hopeful about what it could be. And Lupe is the kind of kid who could make it happen. And I think we all wish, maybe not everybody, but I think most of us wish that it could be that way.
So how do we make it happen?
We need more Lupes. We need kids who, this book wasn't written for this reason, but I think that if kids read this and they become advocates for these things and go, Lupe did it, I can do it. I mean, she doesn't always have the best presentation, or, she gets herself.
Actually, she's great at PowerPoint, right? So she does have a good presentation.
She's good at creating the PowerPoint. I don't know if the subject matter was always the best, but she does the things that we all wish we would do. And I think that if a kid reading this said, I might try this, they might get pushback because adults are, as we know, adults are not always open to hearing from children. And I hope that could happen. But again, hope. It's just all hope.
To the kid in the middle of the country somewhere in a little town, doesn't even have to be in the middle of the country, in a little town somewhere, whose world is not Lupe's world, and picks up your book at the library because heaven forbid the school should have it, okay, and sees the book. What do you tell that child?
that their environment and their world isn't the only one, and that if they feel like they're Lupe's friend, then welcome and come experience this world as well. And this can be part of your world too. That sounded very Disney. Um, but
Hey, Disney, there's nothing wrong with Disney, right? Disney is responsible for quite a few wonderful things.
yeah.
The wonderful world of Disney, he said, program does it by magic.
To be part of our world. But I think that if they feel comfortable in Lupe's world, then maybe they can say, hey, I can create this, in my little corner, or little section of the world as well. I mean, everything can be more diverse. And, I think a lot of us, when I was a kid, it's curiosity. I grew up, like I said, a very small town, and it wasn't very diverse. And when I was in the 4th grade, one of my teachers convinced my parents, who had very little, that they needed to buy encyclopedias for me. And those encyclopedias, my father still has them, just blew my mind. And I got to go all over the world and see different things that I wasn't able to see, and in this small town. And I think books, not necessarily just this one, but all books, they can open kids, eyes and minds to different worlds, and so they can explore and maybe bring that to their, like I said, little corner of the world.
So I'm having a little mental thought blip at the moment because I got so carried away in what you were saying. Let's talk about her coach for a second. Did you have a coach like that growing up?
Do
Coach
you mean
Solden or Salden? What, could you
Coach
say
Solden?
the coach is?
Yeah,
Solden.
I did. I don't think it specifically, but I think that I know a few that I had like that, who,
And were they all lesbians?
no, I
You
had,
know why I ask, right? Because the character just signals lesbian.
yeah. And I know, I mean, of course, those are things that in a middle grade book, I think that, yeah, it's based on a few of my coaches growing up who were really pivotal in my teaching and how I approach things and giving me advice. They're
But she
lesbian.
did, but she's not one dimensional. I mean, you gave
No.
her a great many layers, right?
Mhm.
Lupe broke one of her records.
Yeah.
I read that correctly, right? She's also multifaceted in that she had her own run-in with square dancing in the past and was hurt by it.
Yes.
And here she was today teaching square dancing. And you were able to find closure for that character as well. How did you pull off that little mini arc in the overall arc of the book? Because that's a minor character that's very well defined.
Well, I think that as writers, I mean, for me, I think of every single character and what's going on in their life. And I sit and write about them and what I think their past was and what they've gone through. And Coach Solden specifically does remind me of some of my coaches, and how, she's very dedicated to her job, but she cares about the students, and but also has her own wounds and things, and that adults don't stop their own character just because they're an adult in a book. They can have growth, and she needed this, and I felt like if she had this wound, I needed to heal that wound. I think, I'm in healthcare, and you always think about, okay, how am I going to fix this for this person, or what am I going to do? And in books, we do that through their character arc. It doesn't always turn out well, but you try. And for her, I needed to give her that. And I think she's based on, a few coaches that I adored. And I'm like, okay, I need to give her this closure.
Well, I think she certainly ended up in a better place than where she started. And I do think that she did reach closure. And it was nice, right? Because you get a behind the scenes look at why she's acting in a certain way when she acts a certain way. And it makes the character more real, as opposed to the one-dimensional characters that you sometimes get. But that takes a lot of work, So how much of this novel is in or on the cutting room floor, right?
Oh,
Because
like 90%. There's a lot that's in my mind, but I did, when I'm done with a novel, I have a box of, I'm not just stacks of paper with character development and setting and things that never make it into the book. And it's part of its world building, but a huge part of it is, which I think is way more important, is character development and making sure the characters are rich and each has their own background. And
so you're ready for a Netflix series. Is
um,
anyone listening? We need this sort of diversity on our televisions, right?
well, it's funny because I do think, like, I have this, this other idea of where Lupe could go next. And I
And
still,
again, you anticipated my next question. When do we get a second novel?
that would be up to not me. So, but even if nothing ever happened any further with Lupe, for my own, my own closure, I need to write more about what these characters are doing. And a lot of it involves her grandparents and her relationship with them, and her friends, of course. And so, yeah, I've started kind of pinning down ideas and things, but it's more so for me just to kind of write these little mini scenes, and I laugh and I love being back with these characters. And
Well, it sounds like you are with the writing like I am with the music. I can't have an open chord. I need to resolve the chord. If the chord isn't resolved, my ear's going like this.
yeah,
I can't have the open chord. I need it resolved.
closure.
Oh, I'm big on closure. If they don't give it to me, I end it. It's like, so speaking of endings, we're coming to an end, but I have a very pressing question.
Okay.
Which is your favorite doctor?
Oh, do you watch Doctor Who?
So our wedding cake featured the 10th Doctor carrying Captain Jack into the TARDIS. That was the top of the layer. And offline, I'll see if I can find a picture and send it to you, because it was, oh, and then the three tiers were Gallifrey and Earth. The guy who did Cake Boss was the one who did a kit for us here in Washington,
Oh, I
D.C.
have to see
It
this.
was an amazing cake. So who's your favorite doctor?
Okay, my family, we argue all the time. I liked Matt Smith.
I loved Matt. I thought he was wonderful. I have to say I'm a softie. My favorite is Tenet, right? 10. I love 10.
See,
I grew up with 4. I grew up with 4.
yeah.
I'm old, so I grew up with 4. But Matt, at the beginning, I thought, who is this man-child? And then as he kept going, I'm like, oh my God, I loved him.
Exactly. Yes, my husband and daughter love David Tennant, but I was a Matt Smith man because for that reason, because I was so like kind of like prove it, and then
He did.
he did, and that's I think why I love him.
But I think one of the things that people that don't watch Doctor Who don't understand is that by the time they leave, you are crying. It does not matter who the doctor
Doesn't
is.
make exactly.
You are
Yeah.
in tears because whoever's running the show does such a wonderful job of running the show that you just end up empathizing with all these characters.
Yeah.
And then you see the cast on other things and you're like, oh my God, you can act.
Isn't that bizarre? Yeah, sometimes I'll see someone, I'm like, wait a minute, what are you doing in this world? Get back over,
Right. You're actually an actor. I can't
Yeah.
believe you exist outside of this other universe. So, all right. So an 11 and a 10. And which doctor did you grow up with?
Well, I didn't. I mean, I knew Doctor Who in those early
So you came in on the reboot.
yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
Well,
and
that was a good place to start.
yeah, and I
And
loved it because I could watch it with my kids, and so many amazing lessons to be learned, from that world.
so I have to be honest with you. When I got the query about whether or not we even wanted to read the book, and I read that she's into Doctor Who, I write back to Lavin Querido and I'm like, you had me at Doctor Who. I don't care what the novel is about. Send it. I'll read it.
There's so many people who have like, oh, I haven't watched it. And yes, there's little hokey stuff, but it's such an amazing series. But
it's all hokey. That's why it's quite wonderful. I mean, it's fantastic. It's designed to be hokey, down to the plungers that they use on the Daleks.
Yes. Yeah.
All right, so we've geeked out sufficiently. I think like the children did in the room while they're wearing their pajamas. That's a way back reference to the people who have actually read the book. Listen,
Yeah.
I have had a great time. Thank you so much for
This was
joining
wonderful.
me. I wish you nothing but success. When does the book come out?
It launches September 8th. And I think
so it'll be, I think, the week before this interview airs. So we'll have a nice little cushion the week before. And look, I don't sell books. I just review them, right? I tell you what I think. I think it's going to be pretty obvious what I think when you read this review, that you should go out and buy it. It's a wonderful book. Not only is your kid going to love it, you're going to love it too. We have an amazing author here. It's an amazing book. It's put out by an imprint called Living Querido, which is relatively new to the game. And so far, they're putting out amazing stuff. Thank you again for joining me. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And I'll be talking to the rest of you back at the desk.
I like to think that there's a little bit of Lupe inside all of us. A little bit that wants to buck the system, a little bit that wants things to change. And you know what? If there isn't, there should be. I hope we're instilling some of that. Let's change the bad things into better things in all of our children. That's kind of the reason why authors write these books. That's all of the reason why we should encourage our children to read them. At Mr. Alex's Bookshelf, we like to bring you these books so that you can share them with your children. And remember, we know that the word parent is not just a noun, it's also a verb. Click subscribe, click like, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.